Hello, and welcome to the EDM Council and Security EDM webinar titled How CISO, CDO, and CPO can collaborate to implement unified data controls across hybrid cloud. Jim Halcombe, Head of Product Management at the EDM Council, will be kicking off the presentation. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Yolande. Welcome everybody to this conversation that we're going to have today about the unification of security and data management and privacy. I'm particularly excited about this conversation because it's overdue, quite frankly. My background, so I'm currently head of product management for the EDM Council. That includes our products, CDMC. CDMC Plus is a new product that we've just launched the development of. I also have DCAM, all of our SIG special interest group programs and our training. My background is I've formerly been a chief data officer, and I was most recently a chief data officer at a cybersecurity firm. So I was starting to feel the challenge of unifying these different areas in my most recent experience. So I'm very, very happy to have this conversation with these gentlemen. So please go to the next slide. So we are joined today by Mahood Khan. He's the global CISO and the senior vice president at CNA. Myself, I'll be moderating throughout this conversation. And we're also joined by Rehan Jalil. He's the CEO of Securiti. And so with that, I want to kick things off with a key question to our panelists. Gentlemen, why are data controls even needed?
Yeah, Jim, let me start off with that, and thank you so much. Very excited to be here today to talk about this very important topic. I agree with you that many of us have struggled in this for a very long time in building that collaboration and unification of data convergence between different teams, and I equally have struggled through those. Even in my existing profession where we are today. And so I find this is a very important, near dear topic to my heart. Going into your question on data importance and controls being important in data, the way I look at this is, data is so fundamental to literally everything that we do, no matter what business we're operating under. Many companies actually have a product that they sell, right? So you'll go to a grocery store, you go to a restaurant, that's their product that they're selling. You go to Walmart, you go to Amazon, they're actually selling actual products. So a lot of the security built in to that business model is around product security and what they're doing. But and it becomes equally important to protect those products. But when we look at someone like my background, where I am currently at CNA, we sell insurance. We consider data as our product because an insurance, if you think about it, really contains quite a lot of data about yourself, the company that you're in, maybe about your family, your medical history, your financial background. And so to us, everything revolves around our product being data, and so it becomes very important for us to be protecting data. So, and it's not just fundamental from the perspective that we got to protect our business for this, but it's very important to protect our consumers whose data we're actually including. So, and similarly, prior to this, I spent about 3 years at United Airlines. The airline business is extremely complex. It's because the CISO is not just responsible for protecting the underlying systems and the applications that all communicate to the data, but we're responsible for protecting the airports and the aircraft itself as well. These aircrafts are very complex machines. We would refer to them when I was at United as flying data center. And anyone in your crowd that's actually working for an airline, they'll relate to that. Part of the reason why we consider them as flying data center is because there's a complex network that's actually built into each individual airline. So if you think about it, when you get on an airline and you're sitting right behind in the seat, you've got Wi-Fi that you're going to be using in that aircraft. That's all powered through an internal network access control that's talking to a satellite. Think about the data that transforms between your seat and onto that satellite. And many of us just like me. We have a habit of jumping on Wi-Fi because we're trying to catch up on work or checking emails. We're transferring that data all across. So how is that data actually protected? Is the responsibility of the CISO that runs, that oversees that airline. Similarly, that Wi-Fi is backed up. There's an internal server that hosts all of the aircraft Wi-Fi applications and other applications that we tend to get very accustomed to. So many of us see this, and when we have a screen in front of our airlines, especially those that travel internationally, we see a screen in front of us, right? There's an application that's sitting there. That application is actually on a server that's really residing on that particular aircraft. And so all of that content and how it's presented, the data that's around to it is all there. And finally, the other element of this, which is probably the most important element, these days, all aircrafts is what we call consider smart aircrafts. And so all of the applications that the flight crew and more importantly, the pilots are using are all automated. So think of it, for example, I'm a pilot and I'm going to be responsible for flying to Chicago, that's where I'm at, to San Francisco. I travel there a lot. So going from Chicago to San Francisco, before I even get in and come in, my route is already charted on an application, an iPad that I walk around as a pilot of that airplane. Once I'm in the airplane itself, all the coordination from my takeoff all the way to my route till my landing are all coming to an application which is hosted on a database, well protected, the backend that communicates back and forth on the satellite. One of the things that I always find fascinating, the amount of automation and coordination, all of those coordination, the digitation that's all in that application are all driven by data. Now you can only imagine if that data or that database is compromised and you modify just a very small portion of this, you're talking about potential for not only just a data compromise issue, now you're talking about the safety of individuals that are on an aircraft. The pilot, if he has the wrong data and wrong coordination, he could potentially overrun and do a runway and therefore cause damage. So it's so important. We don't realize this, that everything that we do in day out, so important that data controls are the fundamental of everything that we do in business. And it can run from anywhere from just simply protecting your data in a backend system to all the way to the scenarios that I've sort of described. So to me, I think I find this data controls important from that aspect of things.
Thanks so much, Mahood, for sharing your thoughts, and there's a lot of learnings from there. And just like from Mahood, we're learning that large enterprises like CNN and others are looking at three different level of controls: infrastructure and application, but data has become a thing on its own. Part of the reason is that now it's sitting in a data lake, it's in a data warehouse. People are going to come and collaborate on it also in a much more open fashion, right? So often the container of the app, of the container of the other things is not necessarily in there when people are also trying to innovate on data, run the machine learning models, analyze things on it, and then of course share. A lot of sharing between the subsidiaries or sharing between third parties is going on. So essentially, if you really want to go innovate with data fast, then there has to be bolt-on, embedded, more automated guardrails and controls around it, so that there is not much anxiety and not much fear that, look, if I'm going to share this data, if I'm going to use this data, share internally with my data scientists and analysts, or share externally, that I'm not going to mess things up. How can you have those controls be embedded so you can go fast on innovation? Just like think about like a car. If you want to go car super fast, I mean, would we sit in the car which doesn't have brakes, embedded, or controls, or cruise control, or autopilot, more and more, or lane keeping, more and more? These are embedded controls when you sit in the car. If you're going to go fast, you need controls. Very much the same. If you want to innovate with data and you want to share it and have the maximum use of it, the controls have to be embedded and more automated inside it. And that will be a fun topic to actually discuss and learn from Mahood also on how you think through that. That's, I think, the fundamental things. You want to innovate with data, go fast, controls are needed.
That's what type of controls are needed that you've found? in organizations, especially, to adopt the cloud. And you spoke of speed, the need for speed. What are the types of controls that you're seeing?
And let me take a stab at that first.
Yeah.
Rehan.
Yeah.
Well, and we can kick off this with asking the audience what kind of controls are important to them, if you want to start there first. So what kind of it could be security, privacy, governance, compliance. All of these are usual controls. You can select all. Go ahead and talk about what type of controls that you're thinking about.
I'm glad you brought up the poll question, because I honestly think, depending on the options that you're seeing, it really depends on who you're asking the question to. So if we've got folks from legal and compliance on this audience, they're going to say, well, we're very much focused on compliance control, because the importance to us is data retention policies and ensuring that there's data destruction on the type of data that's there. I can tell you day in, day out, I deal with that with my legal team, where the biggest concern is, look, Mahood, we don't want to have to deal with data that's sitting out there that simply, should not be there, and we got to get rid of it, because the more stuff you keep out there, the more data
risk
you're keeping your phone open to. So legal will come back and will have their own use cases. Similarly, when I talk to my chief data privacy officer, their focus is more around meeting the obligations of the regulation. GDPR has a set of requirements that we need to focus on, CCPA, and you name it. There's so many different regulations that the chief data privacy officer is focused on. But personally, for me, from a CISO perspective, I really define controls in three main elements of what I look at. Number one, before I even get to data security, I'm more focused on ensuring that you've got data inventory and data classification in there. So we want to be able to ensure and identify where our crown jewels are sitting, because from a CISO, if I don't even know where that exists, what do I know what I'm going to protect on? How do I actually start to put together, my controls around what I should be protecting for this organization? Going back to the earlier question you asked, right? The scenarios that I put together. But if you don't have a good understanding where those crown jewels are there, as a CISO, you can't devise a program on how you should be protecting with the controls that you need. And that could be anywhere from structured, unstructured, cloud, on-prem, you name it. But you got to be able to inventory it, and you got to be able to classify what is important. Far too often as CISOs, we fall victim to protecting everything. Well, if there's a data set out there that's very public and doesn't really need security controls, you're not going to give that the same amount of priority as something that you feel is extremely confidential to your consumers or to your organization. So pillar number one for me is all around inventory and classification. Pillar number two for me is around data security. And that is everything around encryption, tokenization, obfuscation, masking, you name it, protecting that actual data. So to me, that protection is important after you understand where it's sitting. And to me, it's all across the way. It's not just around we often realize that sometimes it's user or system level protection. Sometimes you got to get into this micro element of protection, what I call micro protection from my perspective, which is, you got to look at the data tables. And from a data access management perspective, you might be giving access to a large group to certain things, but that group doesn't need to see all of the tables that are there. So therefore, to us, tokenizing those certain data elements is at the core of protection of the data, is what my use case will come into, or what I feel are the type of controls that are needed. And finally, the third control was purely from a CISO perspective, all about where it comes in being able to see, and your data loss prevention gets a play here as well. But the ability to see end to end where data starts from or where it leaves is very, very important in my personal opinion for a CISO, because that's how you get to the element of being able to respond to potential data impact analysis or data breach prevention. But Rehan, you might have a difference of opinion, but certainly back to you on this one.
No, absolutely. What you pointed is the more core foundation, as you already highlighted, is understanding data landscape, where is sensitive information, and then different things can flow from there. Because if that view is not, is very clear, then there's blind spots. also, I think many times, as we have seen, Mahood, it's not just the production environments. It's also your staging and QA and other environments where a copy of data still may be sitting because the application is getting tested in there. So still a production data often is sitting in a non-prod environments. So how do you manage all of that? Because things need to be tested and scaled. So having a very clear view of the overall data landscape, where exactly are the data systems, what controls exist around it, that inventory has to be there. Now, key question I think where we've seen many customers still early in the journey is to how to automatically extract it. So in many organizations, often it'd be pulled because it's hard to tell, especially in cloud environments. They could be different accounts in different regions, and native data systems, non-native data systems can be there. There's, I think, more automation there that automatically, if you can extract exactly what the data landscape is across all different cloud environments or all different places, I think that's typically we've seen the journey starts. And even on the classification and side of things, it has to be all about automation, where automatic discovery of what kind of sensitive information is there, and then the control context of the controls, not just the sensitive data, like what controls exist around it already, from security controls, from privacy controls, from cross-border, from data residency controls, what things actually exist. Now, as we know, a lot of regulations exist, which will be pointing out like who should be able to access this particular data from which different geographies to avoid cross-border. Again, this is the layering of control that also has to be extracted. What we're seeing is there is a very rapid push from doing things manually, using surveys and data impact analysis, where you polling people exactly where your data systems there. There's a rapid transition we're seeing happening to automation. Figure out automatically where the data systems are, figure out where sensitive data, figure out the controls, layer basically the regulatory requirements on it, highlight the issues more automatically, and then what's called is more about dynamic entitlements, like who should be able to see what information. And we clearly seeing that there is a very rapid journey, especially if somebody's going to cloud, and they can take a fresh look and fresh architecture. We're seeing that layer of automation from inventory all the way to dynamic entitlements, and seeing if the compliance issues and regulatory issues are being addressed along the way. Again, Jim, your initial questions are what different kind of controls. I mean, we're clearly seeing across all four. Your poll was across security, privacy, governance, compliance, across all. And I mean, we were looking at the audience's responses. Clearly, audiences also feels like all controls, all kinds of controls are needed.
Yeah, what was interesting, Rehan, to me on the responses is that while most of the responses, I think 67%, if I remember what I saw, said all. And in my mind, when I was asking the question, I was thinking, well, who wouldn't want all? But the fact of the matter is that not everybody has that responsibility. And so there are some who just have a privacy responsibility, or have, when I was in governance, had a governance responsibility, and I would partner, with others, but my scope was pretty well defined. And I think, and we have a question, 76%, I was told. So we do have a question in the chat about actually getting access to how to manage appropriate versus inappropriate use, and what kind of controls or approaches are needed for making sure that data is always fit for purpose. Do you have any specific comments you want to make at this point about that?
Absolutely. I'm happy to jump into this. So I think the purpose, I mean, depending on either the purpose is defined by your internal policies, or is going to be coming from his consumer data, that consent and purpose, and consent is included as part of it, is going to come from, maybe the consumer has given the consent, and part of that is a legal purpose you take consent for. Often the issue really comes is that the data is captured, but then the legal purpose and the consent is not tied to it.